Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We're going to try our hardest to focus on basketball today, as opposed to talking about Sap's guy, Aaron Rodgers. Looks like going to the Jets pretty imminently. So, we'll try to keep the Aaron Rodgers chatter to a minimum, Sap.
Yeah, I'm wearing green today, but that would have been the case if he stayed in Green Bay or if he went to the Jets. Just a different shade of green. The Packers,
you had all your bases covered with the green.
Yeah, all set. Me and Aaron, we don't have to redecorate our homes. It's already green. The Packers, it's dark green. The Jets, it's called Gotham green, but it's close enough.
Yeah, close enough. So again, we'll try to keep that in the background, but definitely some exciting football news as free agency starts. But we are here to talk about basketball and some interesting stuff, Sep. We've talked about recently the Celtics struggles, and they continue to struggle. So we're going to get into that too. But another top team that's struggling are the Denver Nuggets, Sep. They've suddenly lost 4 games in a row. Nikola Jokic is still considered the front runner for MVP, but some of the shine has come off a little bit, even though he's still playing really well. But they've lost 4 games in a row to not great teams, Sap. They lost to the Bulls. Actually, they got throttled by the Bulls. Then they lost to the Spurs, who are the worst team in basketball. They lost to the Nets, and then they lost to the Raptors. So, Sap, that's 4 losses in a row. None of them are good losses. Not that you can ever really say it's a good loss, but all those teams are currently on the outside looking in when you're talking about the playoff picture. So with the exception of Toronto being in the play-in and Brooklyn too. So, Sap, what is the deal with the Denver Nuggets? We'll start with them.
Well, if the Chicago Bulls could only play the Celtics, the Bucks, the Nuggets, all the best teams in basketball, they'd probably be the 4th seed in the East because they beat the Celtics twice too. So they have a tendency of stepping up and playing the top teams really tough. I think it's just a case of it's a long season. They have a sizable lead in the Western Conference, and maybe they just took their foot off the gas. And Jokic, I've always pushed back that he should be the front runner as MVP. I think it should be Giannis. If this plays out over the final 3-4 weeks of the season and Milwaukee ends up with the best record, Giannis should be the MVP, best player on the best team, who, by the way, scores more than Jokic, rebounds better than Jokic, is a better defender as well. The only area that Jokic has over Giannis is all of those assists, but Giannis is a really good passer as well. That's another discussion for another podcast. But I think Denver just maybe took their foot off the gas a little bit. And some of these losses are at home where they were nearly unbeatable at home, which is surprising. But again, I think we said it last week. They're a soft number 1 seed. I mean,
right.
They could lose in the first round if they play Golden State or the Lakers. It wouldn't be shocking, especially if LeBron's back and Anthony Davis remains healthy. The Lakers could beat Denver in a 7-game series. I believe that wholeheartedly. And if Golden State's the 8th seed, I think they could beat Denver as well. So I think they're kind of a soft 1 seed, almost like Atlanta was 7-8 years ago. Remember when Al Horford was in last year there in Atlanta and everyone was talking about Atlanta, and then, they were no factor in the postseason. I think Denver could be still the team to beat in the Western Conference, but they'd be a soft number 1 seed. And look, I think that at some time during the season, it's a long season, you have a little step back like Denver has, like the Celtics have. In cross-sport reference, even the Boston Bruins were on historic pace, but they've lost 3 out of their last 4. It's tough to maintain that excellence from game 1 to game 82.
Yeah. And so I think that with the Nuggets right now, because we talked about this again last week, Sep, they have such a big lead in the Western Conference as the presumptive 1 seed. It's hard not to get apathetic with such a long regular season, especially when you look at the standings and go, okay, we really have to just completely collapse in order to give much ground and make this competitive for the 1 seed. And so I think that that's mostly what's going on, though. Even with that, Sap, you should still beat a Spurs team that has very little talent and is not trying to win games. And they lost to them by 8 in San Antonio. Granted, Jokic had a triple-double as he virtually always does. But you should still win that game in your sleep. I think the problem with the Nuggets, Sap, too, is like you're saying in terms of what makes them a weak 1 seed is that typically when you're seeing a 1 seed, you see multiple all-stars. This team just has 1. A lot of expectations on Michael Porter Jr., a lot of expectations on Jamal Murray. They've sort of been in and out of the lineup, especially the past couple of years. Neither one's played at a consistent level. And so I think that's what makes teams look at it and say, well, Denver maybe not that difficult. Aaron Gordon maybe has been their second best player in terms of consistency, and he's not an all-star. So you look at it and you go, it's kind of Jokic and a bunch of other good players, not necessarily any great players. And I think that sort of, puts them in a position where they don't look nearly as strong as the standings would indicate.
Yeah, they have a massive home court advantage as well with the altitude. Teams come in the night before a game, they don't adjust, they get blown out, especially in the second half. That happens quite a bit in Denver. And I think you make a great point that who's their second best player? Normally it's Jamal Murray, but he's coming back from missing last year because of the knee. Aaron Gordon's always been kind of an inconsistent guy. He'll have some games where he looks like an all-star and other games where he looks like a marginal player. Michael Porter Jr. is just not a reliable guy. So again, not a lot of support there for Jokic. That may be the reason he wins the MVP when people will turn around, the voters, and say, look, he had the best team in the Western Conference without another all-star. Whereas at least Giannis, Drew Holiday's had a fantastic season, made the all-star team. And now that Middleton's back, we're seeing him start to round into form as well. But I think those are all valid points. But they've had that big lead. Memphis has not played great the last month. Now they don't have Ja Morant for the foreseeable future. Sacramento is a wonderful story, but no one really expects them to go very far in the playoffs. So Denver should still be in good shape to be the 1 seed. And again, maybe Jokic, who plays pretty much every game, plays a lot of minutes. Maybe he's scaled back a little bit, and you just kind of try to get yourself in shape for the postseason.
Yeah, and I think, some of this discourse now has been because they've lost 4 games in a row is that, Jokic is losing his grasp on the MVP. He shouldn't win MVP now. They still have, the same record as they have what they're 1 up in the win column, and they're 1 up in the loss column on Philadelphia. So, Embiid has been getting a lot of support for MVP recently. You and I still think it should be Giannis, but should a 4-game losing streak, do you think is it fair to say that's an indictment on Jokic's MVP candidacy?
No, unless it grows and say they play 500 the rest of the way, and then still are the 1 seed in the Western Conference, but by 1 or 2 games over Memphis or Sacramento, then maybe that would hurt his MVP chances. And also the fact that he's trying to become just the 4th player in league history to win 3 consecutive MVPs. The other 3 being, of course, Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, Larry Bird. Like, it feels like one of those, SAT questions, like which one of these doesn't belong. If Nikola Jokic wins his 3rd consecutive MVP, there'll be 4 players in the history of the sport that have done it. He's outstanding. He's a future Hall of Fame, a great player. He ain't Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, or Larry Bird. He's just not. Maybe there's going to be some backlash to that the voters will say, phenomenal player, great player, but are we going to give this guy 3 straight MVPs when, Michael Jordan didn't win 3 consecutive MVPs, LeBron didn't win 3 consecutive MVPs? Is Jokic that guy that's going to break through and be the 4th guy with Russell, Chamberlain, and Bird? So maybe there'll be some pushback there. I would still vote for Giannis. Again, all these MVP candidates are wonderful. Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic being the top 3. The next level would probably be Luka and Tatum, and they've kind of fallen off. The Celtics aren't playing all that well. I know we're going to talk about them as well. And Luka's been out for a bit, and Dallas is not really connected with Kyrie Irving. There's a big surprise. But the top 3 candidates are certainly Giannis, Embiid, and Nikola Jokic. And clearly, to me, Giannis is the best defensive player. Like, you can talk about points and rebounds and assists and all that fun stuff. It's just every night Giannis plays elite defense. Embiid can be really good defensively. Jokic is just kind of out there. He's okay defensively. Right. And to me, that should be the tiebreaker among those 3 great players.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can point to, Embiid defenders will point to he's averaging, more blocks and more steals than Giannis, but he's also doing everything in the low post defensively. Giannis is covering the best player every single night, typically, and he's in the post, he's on the perimeter. So I do think he's the best defender, like you said, by a wide margin. But the rest of their stats, if you're looking at Giannis and Embiid, very, very close. Embiid has a slight lead in points. Giannis has a lead in rebounds and assists. Embiid obviously is leading him significantly in free throw percentage because Giannis is not a great free throw shooter. Field goal percentage, very close. So that is an interesting race too, Sap. If voters suddenly in the last little part of the season say, you know what, we're sick of Jokic, and they just want to go to Embiid and Giannis. I think that would be a very close race as well. But it does seem like it's it's a very tight 3-man race right now with those 3 guys.
And I'd like to see it play out that way. Like, I don't want to see out of 100 votes, one of them getting 80.
Yeah, no, it
Because
shouldn't. It's
it
crazy.
shouldn't be, right? It should be closer than that. It shouldn't be like one getting 80 and the other 2 guys getting 10 votes. That just doesn't make sense. It should play out that it's closer than that. I mean,
And that's what it was, Seth, at
oftentimes,
the straw
right?
poll at the All-Star game.
Yeah.
It was Jokic by a wide margin. He had 85 out of 100 or something like that.
In the year of the bubble, Giannis won the MVP unanimously. Well, I wouldn't say unanimously, define that, but by a wide margin over LeBron. I thought it should have been closer. I thought LeBron should have won the MVP that year. If not, it should have been closer. It was, again, like 80-20. Like, to me, that's groupthink at that point. It's almost as if some of the voters aren't really paying attention and they're hearing that Giannis is going to win it or Jokic is going to win it, and they go along.
Yeah.
For what reason? They just want to pick a winner. I mean, this isn't the Kentucky Derby where you make money by picking the winner. It's the MVP. You have a vote. Pick who you want. I've said this during presidential elections. Don't just pick who you think's going to win. Pick who you think is best for the job. Maybe we'd end up getting better presidents at that point if that's the way it worked out. How many times in presidential elections we hear people say, "Oh, I love that candidate, but he doesn't have a chance. I'm not going to vote for him." Well, of course not, because you're not voting for him. If you voted for him and other people voted for him, maybe they'd win.
Yeah, it's true. No, it's a great point. I think you saw the same thing with the Oscars. I personally had no problem with the winner. I like that movie a lot. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Go watch it if you haven't. But they release the ballots for some people who would say it's okay, and they have like a little description of why. And a lot of their descriptions don't make any sense. They're like, "Oh yeah, I didn't see the other movie" or something like that. It's like, well, then why are you voting on it?
Right, like Bill Murray. There was Bill Murray on Saturday Night Live, was like the film critic on Weekend Update, and they bring out the contending films, and he'd say, "Didn't see it, heard it was good," and throw the card away. And he'd only seen like 2 of the 5 nominated films, because back then it was 5 nominated films. I wish they would do with the Oscars is count it backwards, like the Miss America, Miss Universe pageant, like 4th runner-up, 3rd runner-up, 2nd runner-up, and then go from there. Make it more drama-filled, because look, films are about drama, so make the Oscars more of a drama occurrence.
I haven't heard that idea before, Seth. I kind of love that idea. Why don't they do? They should do that with the MVP too.
Sure, have them all out there, the final 5 candidates, and count it backwards.
Right.
What would happen is someone would complain that they're humiliating people. Like, no one wants to be the 4th runner-up when there's only 5 candidates. But
no,
you know what?
A nightmare.
He still got nominated. Yeah, absolutely.
So no, I like that idea, Sep. I think that's good. So yeah, Nuggets are struggling a little bit, but again, they have a lot of room to play with in the Western Conference. Team that doesn't have any room to play with in the Eastern Conference are the Celtics, who are quickly in a race now, less so for the 1 seed, more so for the 2 and the 3 seed, them and the Philadelphia 76ers. And that culminated with probably the worst loss of the season, Sep, Monday in Houston to the horrible Rockets, giving the Rockets their 16th win of the season. And Jason Tatum missed a layup at the buzzer to send the game into overtime. It's just a terrible game by pretty much everybody besides Jaylen Brown. And the Celtics have no business losing to a team like the Rockets. And that comes off of the heels of they had won 2 straight games. Looked like they had maybe righted the ship, beating Portland and Atlanta. But prior to that, they had lost 4 of their previous 5. And like I said, falling in the standings quickly. They don't really look like they're in danger of dropping anywhere below 3. But it looked like for a long period of the season, Sap, they were going to be the presumptive 1 seed. Milwaukee's now got a pretty good handle on that. And so they're neck and neck with the Philadelphia 76ers right now. They do own the tiebreaker with them. So that's an extra game essentially right there. But they're just not playing good basketball at all, Sap. And a lot of this bad play has started not just right after the All-Star break, but right after they gave Joe Mazzulla a contract extension and removed that interim tag from him. So at the time, Sap, I told you I didn't think that was the right decision. And it's looking less and less like the right decision right now, because they don't look anything like the team that we saw for the first half of the season.
No, they're 5-5 since the All-Star break. They started out 42-17, but even more pointedly, they started the season 21-5, and that included a couple of overtime losses to Cleveland. They were playing phenomenal basketball at the start of the season. So a 21-5 start has been followed up by a stretch where they're 26-17, which is essentially 50 win pace, which is good, but they're better than that. And I think a lot of it ties in to 3-point shooting. During that first 26 game stretch, again, 21-5, they shot 40% from beyond the arc, which is phenomenal. That's what the Golden State Warriors shot with Steph, Clay, and Kevin Durant. I mean, that's all-time great. Since that point, since they've gone 26-17, they're shooting 36% from beyond the arc, which is league average. So I know 40% to 36% doesn't sound like a big difference, but when you're talking about 3-point shooting, it's a massive difference. It's 4 percentage points less, but it's 10% less. That's how the math works. So that's been a big issue, and they keep chucking up threes. I mean, Joe Mazzulla talks about they don't take enough threes. And I want to be pointed on 3 players here. And again, they're your 2 best players and your longest serving player. Let's look at Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart. So far this year, they've attempted 1,300 3-point shots. They're shooting 34% from beyond the arc. That's below league average. The rest of the team has attempted 1,600 3-pointers. They're shooting 40.4%. Again, the other guys, the supporting cast, if you will, has been shooting over 40% from 3-point territory, while your 2 biggest stars and your longest serving player, Marcus Smart, who most think is the leader on the team, certainly the biggest personality, those 3 guys are shooting 34%. So I think, maybe Brown and Tatum and Smart should maybe tone it back a little bit, drive to the basket more. I wish they would have Marcus Smart in the post more. I know it sounds odd in today's NBA that you'd have your point guard in the post, but he's their best post offensive player in the post. Why not use him more? So I think that's a major, major problem. Is the 3-point shooting's not as good as it was the first 2 months, and your 3 guys that are the face of the franchise, if you will, just aren't shooting well from 3-point territory, and they keep chucking it up, and that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty dead-on assessment, Sap. The Celtics average 42 3-point attempts a game. Only team that shoots more are the Golden State Warriors. The Celtics do not have Klay Thompson or Steph Curry, so that's that's a bit of an issue. If you're going to be shooting the same amount as the team that's the greatest 3-point shooting team of all time. So they take too many, without a doubt. And the bigger problem I have with that, and I think I said this the other week too, Sap, is that they're unwilling to change how they play. It's like if you're making them, great, okay, they're going to probably win that game by 15 points. If they're missing them, keep shooting them. That's what Mazzulla says, and that's a very analytical approach to the game. And I don't say that as a compliment. It's being way too reliant on saying, well, we have to make them eventually. Well, some games you just don't, and you have to change what you're doing, especially in the playoffs. Like, you can punt some of these regular season games and say, okay, we just got to keep shooting and maybe we'll shoot our way back into it. You can't hope in a playoff game. You got to, every game really matters. You got to win those games or you're going home. So I'm worried that they're going to continue this sort of philosophy into the postseason, and I just don't think it's a successful strategy in the postseason. Mazzulla at the end of the game the other day in his post-game press conference said something along the lines, or I don't hear people complaining when we miss layups. Layups are just as hard to make or as threes, or something along those lines, or harder to make, something close to that. I don't have the quote exactly right, but like, that's statistically untrue. It's shooting a layup or shooting in the paint is a much higher percentage shot than 3. I know 3 gets you 3 points and a layup gets you 2, but you're percentage wise much more likely to hit a shot in the paint or a layup. So
it's called a layup for a reason.
I don't know what the hell he was talking about.
Yeah, it's called a layup for a reason. Like in life, it's like, well, this is a layup.
Yes.
We're going to go to this restaurant because we know it's always good. That's a layup. But we're going to go see this movie because the reviews are great. It won 7 Oscars. Everybody loves it. That's a layup. The choices are called layups for that reason. And I know earlier we talked about Jason Tatum missing a layup that would have tied that game against Houston. He misses a lot of layups for a guy who's 6'9", 6'10", 230 pounds. I mean, he's not as big and strong as LeBron, but he's also not as frail looking as, say, Brandon Ingram or Kevin Durant. He's kind of in between. He's pretty strong. That's all we ever hear Brian Scalabrine talk about, how big Jason Tatum's shoulders are. It is kind of a turnoff. Well, Brian Scalabrine is kind of a turnoff anyway. But he misses a lot of layups. And I'm thinking, could this be the case? from a psychological standpoint, remember in the bubble when he went up to dunk the ball against Miami in the Eastern Conference
Bam
playoffs?
Adebayo blocked him. Yeah.
Bam Adebayo's block. Is that still in the back of his mind that he just doesn't want to get blocked ever again? It'd be like a wide receiver that got lit up going across the middle of the field, just isn't going to go across the middle of the field anymore. The other thing is, and I don't know, we'll go back to the 2016 presidential election. How big are his hands? Because we've seen him miss dunks. And most of his successful dunks are two-handed dunks, if you notice, right? So maybe the guy just doesn't have huge hands because he's missed like uncontested dunks. That's a problem. And a big part of his game is going to the basket. He misses a lot of layups. I mean, if he can solve that problem, he'll become even more unstoppable. But that has been an issue with Jason Tatum and maybe something that he has to address more than anything else. But back to Joe Mazzulla, yeah, I mean, the team shoots 37.7% from three. He's of the mind that if you take 100, you're going to hit 38 of them. Let's round up a little bit. Well, if you're 10 for your first 50, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hit 28 of your next 50. Like,
right.
I like analytics and all that fun stuff, but analytics tell you what's already happened, not necessarily what's going to happen. And we see this in football a lot where Mike McCarthy used to drive me crazy, the former head coach of the Green Bay Packers, who would talk about, well, if we have 30 rushing attempts, we win. Well, you get 30 rushing attempts when you have a lead. Of course, you're going to get 30 rushing attempts. If that's the case, you know what to do? Come out the first 30 plays of the game and just run the football because now you've clinched victory, according to Mike McCarthy and analytics. So you have to be careful with that because analytics aren't necessarily three-dimensional. They're only two-dimensional, and sports and life is three-dimensional. So, yeah, I don't get why they continue to chuck up threes. Maybe Joe Mazzulla is selling insurance on the side as an actuary and says, well, if we just take enough, we'll hit the proper number. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Every game is different, and you also have to concentrate on situational basketball, which the Celtics aren't very good at.
They're terrible
turn the ball over
awful.
Way back, because we saw 20 years of great situational football with the Patriots, right?
Yes.
Clock, timeouts, just situational football. They were better than everybody else. The Celtics are horrible at it. I mean, you have a 28-point lead against Brooklyn. Do you have to rush your offense and take threes? Like, I'm not saying you milk the clock. You can't go into a four corners offense a la Dean Smith, but, play better situational basketball. And they're just not good at it. And I don't want to hear that they're a young team. I mean, Brown's in his 7th year, Smart's in his 9th year, Tatum's in his 6th year, Malcolm Brogdon.
They have experience,
Derek
ton of playoff experience.
Yeah. A ton of experience. Exactly. It's not like they get bounced in the first round and don't make the playoffs. These guys have played a lot of playoff games. I'm tired of hearing about that. I don't want to hear that they're inexperienced. And I think part of the problem too, and I'm going to bring up your guy, Marcus Smart, who I thought was playing his best basketball before the All-Star break. When he got injured and came back since the All-Star break, he's not the same player.
He's been horrible, Seth.
He's been horrible. Terrible. I mean, before the All-Star break, he was averaging 7.1 assists per game, which would be his career high. He was a plus 6.6 plus minus, outstanding, playing good defense, really distributing the ball, not looking to shoot as much. Since the All-Star break, 3.6 assists per game and is a minus 6.8 plus minus. So he's like gone from a really good player to a horrible player. And you're his biggest fan, and you described it as such. So I think he's regressed since coming back. Maybe he's not healthy. Maybe he's trying to prove his worth because Derek White was playing at such a high level. I think that's a big part
of it. I do think that's it, Seth.
He's got to prove his worth. And I know we want to talk about Grant Williams as well. I don't know what's going on with him. So Smart and Williams are the two guys that you have to look at that they have to play better if this team's going to win. Now, obviously, Tatum and Brown are still the linchpins of this team, the key players on that team. But, you need other players to step up. The guy I'm really confident with is Malcolm Brogdon. He'll have an occasional bad game. I get it. But I'm pretty confident that he's going to go out there and give you 16, 18, 20 points and be efficient. He wasn't the other night, but he's really good.
The guys you're confident in are the two most veteran players in the league. Him and Horford. You're like, yeah, okay. Yep. They're gonna show up. Solid. They'll play hard. Yep. They're gonna do what they do. Just for extra context, here was the Joe Mazzulla quote, Sap. Just because you're closer to the basket doesn't mean it's easier to score. Well, for someone who relies on analytics, yes, actually it does. It does, in fact, mean it is easier to score. Mm-hmm. If you move closer to an object, you're more likely to hit that object. That's just a fact. So I don't know what the hell he was talking about. But frustrating. We talk about experience, Sap. You got all these guys who have experience. That's the thing that stands out like a sore thumb. Right. He doesn't have experience.
No, not at all. This is new for him.
That's scary going into the postseason.
Now, a contested 2-pointer may be more difficult than an uncontested 3. I'll give you that. But, are you getting uncontested threes? Are you just missing some layups that you should make, a la Jason Tatum, who seems to miss a couple of layups every game that he should make at his size with his skill set? So Missoula, at times, when you listen to him after games, he almost sounds like a sports talk show host. Like he's trying to be a contrarian, and he's kind of abrasive and combative. He's kind of the John Tortorella of the NBA, who, now is the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, and wherever he's been is always fighting with the media. I don't think Missoula's at that point yet where he's that confrontational, but he gets that way at times. And it's almost like he's trying to be a contrarian. And then he will pose a question to the writers like, how come no one ever says anything about us missing layups? Well, I think we're talking about missed layups, aren't we? Because Jason Tatum should have tied that game up Monday night. And you know what he did? He missed a layup. We're talking about it, and so is everyone else.
Yeah. And the other person, Sap, you mentioned, we'll just briefly touch on him, Grant Williams, also playing terrible. And not only is he playing poorly, but his minutes are all over the place. A couple DNP coaches' decision, a couple of games with single-digit minutes. He's not shooting the ball well. He's not defending well. Obviously, he had the big gaffe in the Cavaliers game where he missed 2 free throws that either one would have won the game for them at the end of regulation. So he's been horrible, and he was, somebody that for the first part of the season playing really well. You were hearing about a potential $20 million a year contract. The Miami Heat really want him. There's going to be all these bidders in free agency. Well, he's played himself out of a lot of money, Sap, and he complains to the officials when he's on the court, and he doesn't really contribute all that much. It's been, for somebody they were counting on to be a big part of their playoff rotation, he has been nowhere to be found for months now, it seems like.
He's losing minutes to Mike Muscala and Blake Griffin. That's problematic. And as you said, Jet, before the season, he was offered a 4-year, $50 million deal from the Celtics, which is $12.5 million a year, turned it down, and now he's playing himself into a lesser contract going forward. And again, he's only 24 years old. Take that contract and build from there, because after that contract's up, you're going to be 28. You can sign another contract, continue to just build your resume. Before the All-Star break, he was averaging 28 minutes per game, was shooting 41% on threes, averaging nearly 9 points per game. Since the All-Star break, averaging 19 minutes per game. He had a couple of DNP CDs, which is really an issue. And he's shooting 32% on threes and averaging just below 5 points per game. So a guy who's been a nice role player for them, 3-and-D guy, is just not the same player. Is Missoula put him in a doghouse? I don't know. There's a lot of issues going on with Grant Williams, and they're going to need him because he's a guy who can play defense. And again, with Rob Williams always being a question mark, if you're playing Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference Finals, Al Horford does a really nice job against Joel Embiid, but against Giannis, he does a good job against Joel Embiid as well. But if you're playing Giannis in the Eastern Conference Finals, Horford does a decent job against him. He can't keep up with him for 7 games and 48 minutes. He's not going to be able to do that. Grant Williams did a pretty nice job against Giannis in the postseason last year. Giannis had 3 40-point games. He's going to do what he does, but he made him work for it, and he wasn't very efficient. So you're going to need to get his headspace right going forward. I want to see him on the court instead of Mike Muscala or Blake Griffin at this point. I'm not sure what's happening with Grant Williams, but they got to get him right in the next 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, what worries me, Sap, it's not so much that he's playing poorly. I mean, that's obviously not good. That's concerning. But it's way too late in the season for Missoula to be effing around with his rotations and still figuring that out. It's outrageous to not. And again, okay, Grant Williams, DMP coach's decision, 1 game, whatever. But then the next game he'll play 30 minutes, and then a DMP. What are they doing? You gotta have these things locked in. You don't have much time before the playoffs. This is the stuff you figure out the first 2 months of the season, not the last 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, you're experimenting here, and now you're playing with a young guy's head who maybe is losing confidence. Look, players are all very boastful, and Grant Williams is certainly one of those guys. He's a personality. He can be annoying, I'm sure, to his teammates, certainly to someone who watches games and obviously referees and opponents, but he may not be playing with much confidence right now. He can't be playing with any confidence because he doesn't know what his role is. As you said, Jet, he doesn't get off the bench in a game against Cleveland. And then the next time they're playing Cleveland, he's playing big minutes. Then the other night he played 8 minutes against Houston in a game that you lost by 2. Like there's got to be more than 8 minutes available for Grant Williams. So I don't know what's going on with him. And again, Missoula, they got off to a great start. They were hitting threes, as we detailed earlier. When you're shooting 40% from 3, you're going to win a bunch of games. In fact, the Celtics this year, Jet, and again, I keep pushing back against analytics and numbers, and I do embrace them. But again, as I said, those things tell you what happened, not necessarily what's going to happen. My numbers that I'm putting forth is kind of an explanation of why they play so well early and not so well later on. The Celtics are 26-0 when they shoot 40% or better from 3. They're 21-22 when they don't. So they're a 500 team unless they're shooting 40% from 3. That's the line of demarcation. So that's where they have to kind of straighten things out going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's you need to be more well-rounded than saying, okay, if we make our threes, we win. We miss our threes, we lose. Like if you're a championship contender team, it can't be just as simple as that. That's just not something that is workable. I know we wanted to talk about the tournament really quickly, but there is a bit of breaking news on the basketball front that Ja Morant's gotten an 8-game suspension from the league for conduct detrimental, as the result of the gun incident in the nightclub in Colorado or strip club, I should say, and the other prior reports. How do you feel about, Sap, just your initial reaction to an 8-game ban from Ja Morant?
Now he's missed some games imposed by the team and himself.
Yeah, I think like
8 games?
4 or 5 games. I think this is now subsequent.
Okay, so it starts now. So yeah, I mean, I can see where the NBA wants to do that. They're very conscious of their image.
No, sorry. I'm sorry. I just, let me clarify. I was wrong. It is that it does cover the 6 games he missed and then 2 more.
Okay, 2 more. And I know he's gone to a place to get help, right?
Supposedly.
At least that's what I heard from Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp, and I like those guys, but I don't know if they're the most reliable sources. They're hot take artists, which is kind of what we are, which is, they just make a lot more money. But I think he's gone to try to get some help, and good for him. If he realizes what the issue is, maybe he has an issue with alcohol. I don't know. Again, we're all speculating here. I think he'll be back before the season ends. Memphis is a contending team in the West, and I know everyone always has the athletes' mental or physical health first, or they're supposed to. But when Memphis is brass, which this is a franchise that's never been to an NBA Finals, I don't even know if they've been to a conference finals. If they think they have a chance,
one
maybe
conference finals, I believe.
Yeah, maybe with Gasol back in the day.
Or like with Randolph and Tony Allen, maybe.
Yeah, they were in there once when the West wasn't all that strong, and
right.
It was either the Spurs or the Lakers winning it every year. Yeah. So maybe they're going to say, well, we think he's okay now. Let's get him back out there, because it's not a physical problem. So maybe they'll paint it at that. But let's hope he gets the help needed. Maybe he's also doing this to save his endorsement deal with Nike and with Powerade. Or is it Gatorade? Gatorade, which is a Coca-Cola company. No, wait a minute. Gatorade is a Pepsi company. Powerade is a subsidiary of Coca-Cola. Yeah. So he's got 2 major deals with the energy drink and with the sneakers. So I sound like I'm 90 years old with the sneakers, with Nike, obviously the Jordan brand. But a lot of money's on the table, and then his contract kicks in next year, over $40 million a year. So he's got a boatload of money that's going to start kicking in next year. Maybe he just wants to save those endorsement deals, right? So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, let's hope he gets the help he needs, and just at some point realize, this is a huge star in the NBA. Like you said, you have cousins that are probably teenagers. Their favorite player is Ja Morant, right? I mean, he's exciting. He's like the next Allen Iverson, right? Like in terms of a guy that people, like the kids, just love because he plays so hard, plays his ass off, and is such an exciting player.
Yeah, here's the statement from the NBA. Ja's conduct was irresponsible, reckless, and potentially very dangerous, said Adam Silver. It also has serious consequences given his enormous following and influence, particularly among young fans who look up to him. He has expressed sincere contrition and remorse for his behavior. Ja has also made it clear to me that he's learned from this incident and that he understands his obligations and responsibility to the Grizzlies and the broader NBA community extended well beyond his play on the court. So, Adam Silver touching on exactly what you just said there, Sap, that, he's got a lot of kids and young fans that look up to him. And, so that's important, obviously, that philosophically, that's more important than the shoe deal or the energy drink deal.
Right.
But, he's a young guy. He wants to make sure that he's maximizing his earning potential while he still can. So for him, it's twofold. He doesn't want to ruin his whole reputation, I would assume, and he wants to make sure he's securing all the money he possibly can. As we've talked about with him before too, his style is not necessarily conducive to a long, healthy NBA career.
No, very similar to what Derrick Rose, we could say, John Wall, Russell Westbrook, these hyper athletic point guards that aren't really
Westbrook
great
doesn't get
shooters.
hurt.
He's indestructible, right? I mean, there's probably some teams he's played on that wish he got hurt. He's like the guy that keeps showing up to work every day, and then you look and go, why doesn't this guy ever take a vacation? He's annoying the hell of us, of all of us. So, Iverson was similar, but Iverson wasn't a great perimeter shooter, but the game was different then.
Yeah.
It was also a much more physical league. But I always compare Morant somewhat to, say, Derrick Rose, John Wall, Russell Westbrook, very similar guys, not necessarily, obviously they're skilled. They're among the greatest players in the league, but they're more athletic than skilled. Whereas a guy like Chris Paul, who it looks like he could play till he's 50 because he's not playing on athleticism. He's playing on skill and smarts, and somewhat James Harden's similar. Like James Harden plays like an old man game, kind of the way Paul Pierce could still be really effective at like 36, 37, because he wasn't playing based on his athleticism. When you have that skill set, you can play forever, which again, I think the likes of Kyrie and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, because they're so skilled, they can play later into their 30s because of that.
Yeah. But it's, so we'll see. Hopefully Ja Morant, cleans up his act and things get better. We are going to talk about the tournament. We'll do that the next show, talk about some of the prospects that you can look to see and maybe give our pick, Sap. But we are out of time for today, so we're going to take off. This has been the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer for the show. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will be back again later in the week, talking a little bit of the tournament, more NBA news. So listen to us then. Thanks for listening, everybody. See ya.